Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about utopian capitalism and just give you an overview of what utopian capitalism is. We're going to go over three main sections of interest, what the idea is, how you implement it, and also how you implement it to the world after that. It starts off with a very simple notion, and that is that wealth comes from two sources. One is appreciation, meaning the amount of money that you generate, the amount of value you generate over time, such as in a stock or in an investment, like a metal, for instance. And then the other is work. Work creates money. You spend a day working, you've created money for yourself out of thin air. Those two situations are the only situations on earth that create money. They create wealth. And every time wealth is created by an individual, it expands the pool of total wealth within a nation. And this is really, it's a simple idea, but it's also an idea that matters to the fundamentals of utopian capitalism. And that's because there's value in every citizen. And I think that we often forget that. When you think about it, there is nothing valuable in a country except for the citizens. For instance, gold. It's worth a lot today, but if everyone got together and decided that we'd no longer use gold for an investment, we could make gold worthless tomorrow just by refusing to buy, trade it. So really, when it comes down to it, the only value that you can consider perpetual within a society is the total of its members, and the work they do and the appreciation on that work and investment that they hold. So just looking at some numbers, $1.34 trillion in circulation as of January of 2015. That's a lot of money. And when I say circulation, I mean that's how much money is printed as of January 2015. There's also 11.63 trillion in currency and savings, money markets, and CD accounts as of December of 2014. And in 2013, our gross domestic product was $16.77 trillion. These are Federal Reserve numbers, and it's just to show that we're dealing with a lot of money here. And a trillion here or there in the context of our entire wealth pool, the total aggregate of money that's been generated in our society by all of the people and corporations that are still living or ongoing concerns. That's a lot of money. So, just to dispel one myth right off the bat, clearly we can print more money, and there's no problem with that. Because printed money is a very small piece of the entire amount of wealth pool that we have in this country. And that doesn't even include, those numbers don't even include the real estate. They don't include stocks. There are many things of value that people hold, and it's a tremendous amount of money, as it should be. Our wealth pool should be infinite, and here's why. I know in the past people have protested based on this notion of fiat currency and not having anything to back currency. But once again, I think that it just hasn't been articulated correctly that we do have something to back the currency, and it's us. People are the value of a nation's wealth. And that's not just a feel-good saying. I really mean this. People are the value. Let's consider a gold miner. Gold miner gets paid $200 a day to mine gold out of the ground or to pan it from a river. At the end of the day, let's say that that miner has a few nuggets and they're worth about $1,000. Well, that means that $200 was created in the form of salary, that person, and in the sense of the gold, it was worthless until it was mined. And at the point that it was in the hands of the miner, and more to the point, in the possession of that miner's employer, it appreciated to about $1,000. So $1,200 was created in that situation. Looking forward then to a nation full of people, let's say 1 billion people, who are all out there with some kind of work, whether it's somebody who guards a parking lot, or someone who paints portraits, or someone who mines gold. Whether the work is a result of an investment of time and expertise, an investment of artistic achievement, whatever those people make in terms of their salary, of the profit from the art that's sold, or in terms of the portion of the investment that's taken from the ground. All of those dollars are faithful because someone earned it, or someone paid as much as it was worth. Therefore, those numbers are worth it. There's no reason to think they're anything but truthful. And that's a really key point, because truthfulness, or knowing that you can have faith in a value, is the difference between the United States never succumbing to a financial collapse, or what we saw in Europe not too long ago, where countries started to suffer collapsed economies. And that's really a big deal. And it all comes down to faith. There isn't anything underlying money except faith. I mean, imagine if we were unfortunate enough to live in a country that was all sand. No trees, no natural resources under the ground, and no resources above it. What if we lived in that sort of situation? No oil, no anything to do, nothing to do except whatever we found to do. If we were in that situation, how would we come up with money then? Well, clearly, if you're in that hypothetical situation, you simply go to work and you have faith that there will be money there for achievements that are made. Maybe in a situation like that, a country decides that it's going to be the #1 supplier of glass articles in the country, or in the world, or who knows? Maybe they'll become terraformers. But whatever the case may be, it's work that produces money, wealth, and value in that total pool. And in fact, let's, for the sake of argument, and one more example, think of terraforming. as appreciation. Someone may go out there and work for a day terraforming and get paid $200 or $300 a day, but then the result of that work gets the employer paid maybe $700 or $800 or more. That's the appreciation of what was worked upon, the land in that case. So what this all means is, and if you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. Currency is infinite, and it should be. Unless you believe that society should run out of money at some point and be forced to simply live within whatever pool of money it has at that moment and never get larger. Well, unless you believe that, then money has to be infinite, because the population is potentially infinite too. And over time, you'll always have more money than you will resources. In fact, it's not really a good idea to back money on resources at all. And if you want to learn more about that, consider what I've written about the gold standard, which you can find later on in the site. But for now, let's just assume that infinite currency is better, because it makes sense. And when you think about it, it becomes more and more obvious. But the importance is, what can we do with that knowledge? What can we do with infinite currency? And it's my opinion that we can do a lot. We can end poverty. We can end taxation in favor of regulation. We can master plan our nation, not just 5 or 10 years into the future, but 50 or 100 or more years into the future, as a result of being able to do things on time without consideration for money that we may need keeping us back. We can inspire others by role model when we do that sort of thing, like ending poverty, taxes, and master planning our nation. And inspiring others by role model is really a big deal, because I think when you have a world full of master planned nations that are fulfilling their personal identity, their national personalities, then who in the world is going to want to destroy it? People will go out of their way to avoid any kind of war. So one of the results will also be end war. And you'll also solve just about every major social problem at once. And that has to do with achieving people out of struggle using infinite currency. Because unlike challenges, which are agreed to on your way to fulfilling your goals and your dreams, struggles are obstacles that you don't anticipate, and when they happen cyclically and when they are insurmountable, they can take away your faith and really do damage to your belief that you may ever achieve your long-term goals at all. But when you use infinite currency for what it's good for, which is whatever you choose, then you can alleviate struggle for everyone. And freeing up all of that stress, all of that thought on how to overcome struggle, and simply realize that in this country we will never suffer struggle, only challenges. That solves big issues like crime. When it's shared in other nations that are our neighbors, it solves situations of illegal immigration, and many, many other things. including increasing patriotism and many other things. So what does this all take? Oh, and by the way, you can read down farther to see more of the benefits and the details that I'm suggesting. But what does this all take? And really, what it takes is just an inspiration, a moment of inspiration to get us going. Because most of these things are already in place. And doing something when you can, because you should, is a lot different than doing something when you have to, because you have no other choice. In terms of doing something for a nation like this, inspiration versus reaction is really a big deal, because that's more akin to war. And this takes us into an understanding of the purpose of society and the fundamentals of what people expect of their society. And if you think about it, when you have a group of people come together, let's say they're in the jungle, their fear is wild animals, their fear is shelter from the environment, their fear is getting lost from their family. So that the society comes together to protect the individuals. And that's really the fundamental reason societies come together, is to alleviate harm, to build a fence to keep out animals, to have gardens so they never run out of food collectively. And on, as the society matures, the fundamental does not go away. Societies are still tasked with alleviating the harm that they identify growing within the lives of more and more of citizens. And if they fail to see a harm growing, then that's what usually breaks apart a society too. And also when they see the harm but they decide, well, that doesn't matter. And then the people who are harmed come together and say, well, it does matter, and they either leave and they go start another country, or they protest and make a big deal about it. So really alleviating harms is the reason societies exist. And then all the other reasons are on top of that. And war has been the only situation in the past that I can think of, at least in my 41 years, that I can think of that has been an alleviation of harm, and it's been a regular one. But it's so much so now that it's less about running into clarification and alleviating the harm of a war, especially since the United States have taken over somewhat this notion of world policemen. When there are vital interests in regions that we consider over others, we take the initiative to help people achieve less violence, and we've gotten good at jumping into conflicts that aren't directly opposing us, but that we consider more strategic. And as a result, I think that this notion of alleviation of harm has gotten really watered down. And that's one reason why more and more people just kind of scratch their heads whenever we get into a new conflict, because the direct correspondence of harm isn't there anymore. So in the minds of a citizen, they're wondering, what is this saving us from? And it's true. It's kind of bewildering, and in the past it used to have at least one good outcome, which was the money multiplier. At the outset of war, there's a lot of spending, and then all along the way through, and with the money multiplier, when you spend $1 on a military base, for instance, it multiplies in the community around it. Not true as much anymore, since many of our bases have been closed domestically and more of them moved around the world. And that's where our money goes. And also the transnational organizations that now receive our money are more transnational. So the money doesn't always multiply in our domestic best interests. But getting back to purpose of society, I think this is really a chance, a very unique and rare chance to actually come to the aid of individuals in the United States to truly alleviate harm. And not only in a broad, ambiguous way, but in a personal way. This is a very unique chance of communication between a federal government and an individual to alleviate the harm of financial savagery. And while you may not find having money savage, I would suggest that when you don't have it and you need it, it can be savage. And that with over 45 million people on food stamps now, that suggests that there's a lot more that have to do what it takes, including accepting help from the government more than once or twice in their lives to buy food. And a food credit doesn't buy you toiletries. It doesn't put gas in your car. It doesn't buy a car. It doesn't pay for car maintenance. Doesn't pay for all sorts of things that people have to buy as well. So they have to do without. And that's one more component of struggle, is the sense of inferiority that you get when you're struggling. And that's a real bad situation, because when you feel inferior and you're taking something, it's sad but true that in this country, whenever you take something from the government in the form of money, there are people who believe that they paid in enough and you shouldn't be taking out as much as you do. Well, that's a superiority. So at the same time you might be feeling an inferiority, someone else is feeling a superiority to you. And that's another harm that can be alleviated by infinite currency, is leveling a playing field and making everything fair. And the way you do that is by paying everybody. I know this is going to sound like a far-out notion, but consider the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Physiological and safety concerns are at the bottom. And that's what I would suggest to you is struggling. When you have to consider those concerns in a very real way, consider that you will either be traumatized by them or you will overcome them. Just having that thought in your mind at all is the beginning of a stress that could be long-term, depending on the factors that are motivating it in your life. And paying everyone to avoid that by understanding what the cost of avoiding it is in the United States, and then giving that amount of money to everybody, whether it be regional on a state level or at a national average. That's up to the people who make the details. But to alleviate struggle is the heart of utopian capitalism. It's the compassion of the society to itself that says, we agree that none of us ever want to struggle in this society, and therefore none of us will. As long as you're an adult in America, you will never struggle at all. And that's how it is. And that's a big deal, because when you free up that many people from the notion of ever struggling, you start to put their perspectives back, because no one will ever lose sight of their long-term goals again. They'll have challenges that they decide they want, and they'll go after them. And if something like a job loss or a health concern temporarily sets them back, they will at least have their struggle-free life to fall back on and wait for their next opportunity to start again. And they never fall below the zero. They're never churning around in physiological or safety concerns. They're merely waiting right above them for their next opportunity to start work or achieve some kind of investment that continues to grow their wealth. That's a big deal. And at the same time, the government shouldn't struggle either. And when you have infinite currency, let's consider food stamps again, or food benefits rather, for an individual. I know that when I lost my job a couple of years ago, I went from a little over, I just gotten a raise, and I was approaching $100,000 a year, plus the bonus every year. And it was really a jarring situation to lose that job, but then to travel back to Las Vegas and think that I was going to sit there for a few months at the most and just be right on my way again. It wasn't really a big deal, but when I hit that 1 year point and then started to go well farther than 1 year without a job, it became a very difficult situation. Not only that, but I didn't qualify for unemployment, and there was supposed to be a meeting about that, but just like always happens with struggling, I missed the phone call. You can't call back, and it was done. So there was no way to get unemployment benefits. So I went straight from a really great job to a really bad situation. So that happens to the government too. If you think about it, one part of struggle is that unforeseen circumstances can knock you into it. And that's why we need to all receive the amount of money we need to avoid struggle. And that is the amount that we expect for a struggle-free life, and then a little bit more. Like in project management, you always pad your amounts, so you have enough for those unforeseen circumstances, or for the rework, things like that. Same is true here with food benefits, for instance. There's always going to be 1 month where you run out before the end, and then you have to scrape by for the last few days until you get them again, and then you're never going to do that again. Well, unfortunately, that happens at the congressional level too. There's a lot of fanfare when a budget is passed, but periodically we get to a December where something unforeseen happened during the year, and then here you go. You have to close down the government the last few weeks of December, and then it's really, hanging your heads low, and everything gets quiet and grumbling. Same thing. And our government shouldn't struggle, because that's what sets up the environment for all of us to live and to achieve. When the government shuts down, the society's leadership is gone, and the structure of how to proceed is cut off from us. So it's something that we shouldn't allow to happen. And with infinite currency, it doesn't have to happen ever again. Another good thing about it is when you tell the truth about money, and that it's infinite, and then you do better with it, you also bring to the table a lot of more truthful situations, such as no more pork barreling, and project management style proposals in Congress for situations that you want to achieve in districts. As a matter of fact, when government gets working faster and more efficient with a master plan in front of it of where we want our country to go, it also even solves the problem of gerrymandering, because when you create more wealth and satisfaction in society, you don't want that to leak over the boundaries of a gerrymandered district. Money multiplies in a blob, and so districts are going to return to blobs, I predict. But more importantly, representation comes back. Because when you think about it, a gerrymandered district, such as the one I used to live in Austin, Texas, I lived in a neighborhood and an area of town that was very democratic. We were in a district, congressional district, with the north side of Houston, Texas, which was predominantly Republican. And when you have a district like that, where predictably, very close to half and half of one party or the other, it may seem on the surface like you're doing some sort of good for balance, but that's not a balance. And balance isn't what you want with a congressional district, or representation in general. With representation, you want representation. And when you have a two-party system that has one candidate or the other in that district, and it's half and half like that, that means that half of the people in that district are underserved on every major issue, because those are the ones where the representatives disagree. And that's no good for our democracy. And in fact, over time, if you get too much of one side in that district, then the other side, or the third side even, will start to feel like, well, there's no benefit in us voting anyway, and just kind of drop out. And that's really, I guess that's kind of the natural way that districts try to reorganize themselves. When one side drops out, you get a greater preponderance of the other as it tries naturally to come back together as a representation rather than a split personality. Also, how do you get government budgets out of this? You may be wondering, if we end taxes, how do you get a government budget? Well, it's exactly what's printed on the dollar. It's faith and credit. When you're in a company, when you're an employee in a company, you expect to be able to open the door when you're hired, walk to your seat, and you have the tools you need to fulfill your job role. And that's something that your employer sets up sometimes a year in advance if they pay for the real estate, for the job furniture, for the articles, the tools you need, the paper and pens, whatever it is. They're supplying that environment ahead of time. And that's what the government does too. It sets up a budget to supply the environment of our country ahead of time. And that's the credit we give to our government. And in the past and currently, we're also paying in that money in taxes that they use for the ongoing budget. And if they need more, they take a loan or whatever they do. But they don't have to. It's our money. So if we say, government, we want you to have $3 or $4 trillion, which would be, $3 trillion is less than 10% of our GDP. We want you to have an upfront loan from the nation that produces almost $12 trillion in GDP. Here you go. Here's $3 trillion. Keep creating our environment the way we expect you to. And as a matter of fact, since the war machine of our country is where most of our money goes to, or a big chunk of it anyway, of our discretionary income goes to war. As we start to eliminate war around the world, we can reduce our budget. But keep in mind also that it's faithful, because just like the company you work at, or the company that you own as an investment, you have to pay some things in advance. And The government budget is the same way. And a lot of that budget is going into the pockets of government workers as salary. So right off the bat, that chunk is all faithful. There's no reason to believe that it's not being used sincerely, properly, and it fits the people that are getting paid, because they're getting paid that amount. So, there's not a worker in this country who will tell you they don't deserve what their salary is. Or if a painter gets paid $1 million for one painting, that painter's not going to tell you that they're not worth $1 million, because they are, because somebody paid it. So it's clearly a faithful amount of money. Faith is a big deal, and as long as you have faith in where your money comes from, how it's achieved in the wealth pool, you have no problems with stability. And stability is a big deal, because right now in the world there is no place where we can put our money and ensure that it's stable. Putting it into an American dollar or a British pound is pretty close, but there is no guarantee. If you put your money in an American bank, you're insured by the FDIC for a certain amount. But if you make a lot of money, then you got to spread it around, or else you don't meet that cap. And even if the country's doing great, a single bank could fail by accident, or by some fluke, and then there goes your money. So there is no certainty right now. But since this is all about understanding our agreements with money and changing them in a perspective way, then I suggest if you change your perspective on money from one of being part of the financial and banking system, and think of money as a component of the architecture of our society itself, because it alleviates struggle, and that's what society's job is. So if money is alleviating struggle, then money becomes a part of society's structure. See? When you think of it that way, then it makes perfect sense. You can say what it's worth. I mean, when you get these notions together, and you've put a value on your money based on work and appreciation, well, those are faithful things. And then what's the value of government's contribution as an appreciation? Well, I would suggest that it's the GDP. If from one year to the next the GDP grows, then the money we allowed the government to have in order to create the environment in which we all work, as that appreciates in the form of GDP, that's government work for appreciation. Same thing. Just projected upward from one citizen to 1/3 of a billion. And that's a really faithful thing. Now, you might be wondering, where do you get the money? When you're a business, you go get a loan to do that type of thing up front to provide the environment, and then you pay it back. With the government, I don't know how you handle it. I don't know. We might just say, here, government, have $3 or $4 trillion, and at the end of the year, maybe we should expect regulation to cover it. Because if you think about it, if you've got taxes coming in, that's really taking something from everybody, whether they did an honorable job or whether they cut corners or whatever it was. They're all paying in. But if you focus on regulation as the way that you achieve income for the government, then it may be that, ensuring that we get a more and more truthful and honest environment through regulations and fees for people who violate them in the corporate world, maybe even a small tax on the larger corporations. For whatever reason, we may need that. that could be our new agreement. To alleviate struggle from small business, and as the business grows, if it's showing a major profit, then take some money from them. Make it realistic. Or maybe we just say, hey, we had a really good year, and government, we think you did a good job. You're making us happy, which is the point. We're pursuing our happiness and we're achieving it more. So we're just going to forgive that loan. Thanks, and write it off. Let's start talking about next year. That may seem a little bit odd, but if you think about it, this is our money. If we decide that it's going to be stable with a little bit of inflation, then it will be. And in fact, if you simply take that money out of the situation at the end of the year, you're slightly reducing the amount that should be in the wealth pool. So theoretically, as you shrink the pool with the same amount of value, then $1 should be worth more. So let's think about that. That means, well, actually we didn't take it out though, did we? Well, that's right. Well, see, even that fits. Because if you're paying people with that money and then just forgiving the loan because it didn't really come from anywhere except our goodwill, well then you're actually adding to the pool with money that shouldn't really be there. Some of it, not all of it. Maybe $1 trillion or something. Because that's money that would just be, I don't know. That's a really good thing for bankers and people that get into details to decide. But I can tell you this, that $1 trillion here or there is nothing. It's a sliver of 1% of our entire wealth pool in America. So there's not any reason to believe that our money should ever be unstable, because so much of it is faithful. It's faithful to the value we put on real estate. It's faithful to the value that buying a stock has to the stock. It's faithful to the amount of salary everybody gets and deserves it. And it's faithful to the reasonable appreciation of the investments we have, which are faithful because someone is willing to pay it. Or an agency that does those types of things is willing to say it's worth that much. So it's faithful. And even when you have a little snafu, well, we've got people that can understand complexity. They'll figure it out. But it's a much better problem to have than the ones we have now, because we have a lot of shortage, and when money is unavailable to people when they need it most, it can be a savagery. And I suggest that cyclical financial savagery is exactly why we have many of the social problems we have today. And really, it's paying people to avoid struggle is really the missing component, I think, of what they tried to do in the USSR. There was I think a very courageous effort there. And I'm oversimplifying this for sure, but there was a courageous effort to achieve struggle-free life for a lot of people. But I think they did one thing that will bring the society to a point of boredom, really, and kind of annoyance, is that providing too much in the terms of goods takes away choice, and that choice can be someone's artistry. When you nationalize a system such as a clothing industry or a shoe industry, or nationalize anything, somewhere in your society there was a person whose life path was supposed to be CEO of one of those corporations, and instead the government decided to take over that job. And when you have too much of that, you have people stirring and wondering what's in this world for me. So paying people but not telling them what to do with it just giving them what they need to achieve struggle-free. That's really the capitalist way of doing things, and I think it maintains that choice that keeps everyone feeling like they have a joy of life, and that keeps you achieving along your path. Now, how does this work with international concerns? Very easily. For starters, if you have a debt to other countries, you continue to pay it with your national currency. And who's more likely to want to see a country have a stabilized currency value than a debt collector? So it's good to have stable currency. And when you do, people will still accept your currency for debt. That's no problem. Same as they always have. Also, how do you value a country then? Well, I suggest you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics or a comparable agency in other countries where they have a profile of all the people that work in your country, and you can put value on each of those types of jobs. For one thing, if you're shifting to a perspective of how much society really is only valued perpetually by its citizens, then put a value on the citizens, literally, and what they do for a living, and that values the country. As a matter of fact, when you do that at an international level, you may, an organization like the United Nations may want to have master plan goals for the entire world as well. Let's say they want to have, everyone agrees with the UN, we want to have some sort of green outcome for the entire world, where zero emissions of this or that, or maybe reoxygenating, or whatever it is. They might have a treaty in place then that suggests, well, let's add multipliers to some of those job roles. If we want to foster green in the entire world, let's put a 3 next to every one of those people that go into some sort of green career. And that is how nations could multiply their value, by promoting those types of careers. And that gives you your ability to assist people, move them in a direction, but only if they want to. You may have domestically focused nations that are having problems internally, and they don't have time to consider what the international community wants of them, and that's fine. They just lose out on that multiplier. Their total value in relation to the others sinks a little bit, but what do they care? They're looking domestically, and this notion of infinite currency is still going to be the best thing they've ever seen, because it's stability. And really, I think that, if anything, that the collapse that we saw in Europe not too long ago really pointed out something that's important, that the euro didn't keep anybody from failing. And that's because there is no personality on the euro. And when a country thinks of faith, and it looks at the euro, it wonders, what am I having faith in? The country wants to see its own identifying markings, images on its money. Or in the case of a country that might be a protectorate or something, wants to see, that other country's face on it. And I think that's why the Queen of England and George Washington have so much value to currency, is it gives people a place to put their faith whenever they look at it. And that's why you need many currencies in one system that keeps everyone's currency stable. Because currency should not be a risky proposition for anyone. Risk is what you choose when you go into the stock market, when you create a business as an investment, when you go to the racetrack. But when you've achieved your appreciation from your investments, you're risky. notions, your real estate, for instance, or anything else, you want to be able to put your money back into something that's not risk-bearing anymore, something that's certain. Certainty allows you to think about things long-term, and uncertainty gives you pause and makes you think, well, maybe this might not happen. So what am I going to do if it doesn't happen? And that's the beginning of struggle in your mind. How am I going to get past that point of uncertainty? The more certainty a society can put into the lives of its citizens without taking away artistry and choice, the better off those societies will be. And money is the last big uncertainty, I think, as war, even in places that have grumbles with each other, they don't want to go to war about them anymore, typically, especially if they've recently fought one. So money is that thing. So let's clean it up, let's recognize the truth about it and do the right things with it, and we can all be heroes for it. And I mean, this will achieve rock star status for whatever president presides over it, and whatever presidents afterward perpetuate it, for the next, who knows how many years. This could be the last, returning to a faith-managed society, a secular faith managed society, which is where you come from, in a society that starts out printing wooden nickels and other things for money that are completely based on faith that you'll believe that this wooden nickel's worth something that we say it is. Getting back to that point of a faith-managed society is really potentially the last great achievement of a world inspiration before we just set our world on coast. And one more thing about that, some people believe that without struggle or some type of forced challenge that people simply won't do anything with their lives. And that's just not true. And I think the evidence is rich people. People who achieve a lot of wealth don't stop working, clearly. They go back to work, they think of something else to do with their money, and they go to it. To think that we're any different, the people that don't have money, would be reckless. And really the notions of superiority that go away with infinite currency and being able to pay everyone a struggle-free amount, that's a really good thing. No more welfare inferiority, no more you have all the, you get all the breaks up there, 1%, no more of that either. No looking down at people and no looking it up shaking your fists. It's just, we all have a level playing field. You can sit at home and wait for your best job and not worry about unemployment. And if you decide not to work, you could get by for your entire life, but it wouldn't be a great life. It would just be a struggle-free life. So if you plan to do more than just sit around and watch TV and maybe have a little bit left over every year to buy one more new TV, if instead you'd like to have a nice house, car, boat, go to work, and then you've got your struggle-free that's always coming in, and you've got your paycheck too. And that makes it fair. So whether you're rich, whether you're poor, you get it the same way. And pretty soon we won't have any poor people. We'll just have more people who have more and nobody that has close to nothing. And for a capitalist society, that's a great place to be. So if you want to know more about some of the details that I've thought through, take a look at the site, utopiancapitalist.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them to me and I'll place them into a knowledge base as I answer them, so that the website and the details can become more valuable as time goes on and as a greater understanding is built for me and for you. Thank you very much.
you.